heard that countdown. Well, good evening, good evening, good evening. Oh, wait a minute. It's not evening, it's morning. Well, maybe you're watching this in the evening if you're watching the replay, but it's morning when I'm doing this. Hey, welcome to Spann's online weather school for kids. This is our sixth installment, I believe. And if you want to go back and watch all of the other ones, it's up on YouTube. Just search James Spann's Online Weather School and you'll find the playlist there. But listen, I know a lot of you guys just watch for the countdown, that great video from Mike Olbinski. His Facebook page, his Vimeo page, YouTube, it's amazing. If you like that countdown video, and thanks to Mike for letting me use that, but it's Mike, Olbinski. He lives out in Arizona, and he's an amazing photographer. All right, today we're going to do another edition of Ask Spann. These questions come from kids all over the United States. We'll tackle those in just a moment. But first off, we have an exclusive camera set up here that you don't see anywhere else. We call this the Spann Cam. You see, I'm home just like you are, and this is set up in the backyard, and we just watch birds. You know, sometimes watching birds can be kind of peaceful. But yeah, that's the Spann Cam, and the birds are having a good time today, enjoying a dry and quiet day. There they come. Come on now. So I could just sit here and watch this all day long, but we're not going to do that today. We're going to talk about weather. So let's begin with the current state of our planet. Ooh, we look good, don't we? That's the planet as seen from 22,500 miles above the Earth's equator right now. Kind of zoom down to the continental United States and got a storm on the East Coast. If you're in Washington, D.C., Baltimore, New York City, Boston, Philadelphia, Virginia Beach, the Outer Banks, it's raining. Kind of a wet storm system. I don't think we'll have any big severe weather problems today, but you see the cloud swirl that's southwest of Detroit. That's kind of the driving force behind that. Middle of the country looks really, really, really good. So let's go right to our weather map, and I hope you know how to read these by now, and if not, we'll talk more about that later. But let's see. I see a couple of blue lines on that map. What is that blue line? What is that blue line that's stretching down the eastern part of the United States? You know what that blue line is? It is called a cold front. Yeah, that's a leading edge of some cooler, drier air. And wait a minute, I see a red line up there around Pennsylvania, New Jersey. That is a warm front moving northward. And driving all of that is a big old L, and that would be a low-pressure center. And the blue H's, you can't miss those. I see one right on top of Texas. Down there just a little southwest of Dallas-Fort Worth. That means that the air is heavier than the surrounding air, and the air is sinking. And when air sinks, it doesn't rain. It's a beautiful day in Texas, Kansas, Nebraska, all those H's you see out there. So that's the current weather map. By the way, let me show you something cool. I love to watch satellite pictures. We've had weather satellites around since the 1960s, but boy, they are good now. They are so detailed and high resolution. Let me show you what it looked like a couple of days ago. Now, we can color those clouds. This is called infrared. It's based on heat. You see the reds and the blacks? Those are really cold, cold clouds, the coldest clouds, which means those are the tallest clouds. And those were big storms, a big old batch of organized storms. They originated around Tulsa, Oklahoma, moving down toward Dallas, and they kept on dropping south, winding up in the Gulf of Mexico. That produced a lot of wind damage earlier this week. And we had a couple of tornadoes in there too, but I absolutely love to watch those. But guess what we had around here yesterday where I am? We had a bunch of these. Goodness gracious, had so many great rainbow pictures yesterday. Had kind of a showery, stormy type day, and after the storms, we had these. We've talked about these before. And by the way, let me just say this right away. This is not a cow chewing on a toy horse. I promise you, this is not a cow eating a toy horse. That is an optical illusion. There's a horse back there in that pasture, but the point of the photograph was the rainbow back there. But I like cows too. But the rainbows were great. By the way, here's a question for you guys, and I think you know this. Do you know the colors of the rainbow in order? Have you learned this in school? And if not, I'll help you. You ever heard of Roy G. Biv? Roy G. Biv. I mean, this has been around for a long time. I think they taught this when I was in school. The colors of the rainbow: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. And the easiest way to remember all of that in the right order, it's just think of some guy's name: Roy G. Biv. And again, it's easy to remember, and I love watching those rainbows. By the way, after I got all these rainbow pictures yesterday, probably had 200, and I'm thankful for everybody that sent those in, this song got in my mind. I don't know why.
Why are there so many songs about rainbows? And what's on the other side?
All right, enough of that. I don't want to get that in your head. That's like ear candy or an earworm. It just stays in there. All right, but let's go to your questions here. All right, I want to hear from you. We got a lot of questions. I'm not going to have time for all of them today, but we're going to roll a bunch of them. And the first two have to do with snow.
We would like to know, why does it not snow much in Alabama?
I'm 4 and I'm Andy. Why is snow so cold?
Why is snow so cold?
Okay, so the first question, if you missed it, this was a child from Alabama, and he wanted to know, why doesn't it snow much in Alabama? And then the second question is, why is it so cold when it snows, or why is snow so cold? Well, first off, if you live in the deep south in the southern West, it actually does snow sometimes, not a lot. This was a good snowstorm. I love this video. This was a few years ago. This is from a friend, Kevin Henderson. He flew a drone. I mean, this guy was rocking a drone in a snowstorm. How cool is that? But this was in the northern part of the great state of Alabama. But no, it doesn't snow a lot here. But I could just sit here and watch this all day between the Spann cam and the rainbows and the snow. I just love to get video and pictures from people of weather, which is just like awesome. But here's the deal. Why doesn't it snow a lot in the southern United States? So here's a question for you. Pick out on that map where you live. That's our planet. That's the Earth. And I think most of you are probably in North America. So there's a good chance that you're on that map. So where are you? And here's the next question. Are you closer to the Earth's equator, or are you closer to the North Pole? And you know the way it works. Because the Earth is a sphere, the equator gets the direct sunlight, and that's where the warmest air is. So the closer you are to the equator, the warmer it is. The closer you go to the pole, generally speaking, the colder it is. And Alabama is closer to the equator. Yeah, it's just too warm for snow most of the time. But every once in a while it can happen. But the cool thing about the planet, the Earth is always trying to balance itself out, reach this magical state called equilibrium. Let me show you guys a short video about how this all works, how the sun's energy creates the wind currents and the Earth is trying to balance itself. This will teach you a lot.
We have this band of moisture moving around the equator, and as you can see, the motion is generally moving east to west. Then we have this band of moisture moving from west to east in both the northern and southern hemispheres, and this is called the jet stream. Then we have the poles that are roughly circulating east to west around the top and bottom of the planet. So we've got cold air on the poles and warm air at the equator, and the jet stream is basically where those two air masses meet. Now, if there was never any exchange of air between these masses, the poles would get colder and colder, and the equator would get hotter and hotter. But temperature is always trying to find equilibrium. So warm, moist air masses move out from the equator towards the poles, and cold air pours from the poles towards the equator. The moisture from the equator moves out, sometimes as a hurricane, typhoon, or tropical storm, and then gets entrained in the jet stream and starts moving from west to east. And the Arctic air travels down over the continents and brings cold weather. The areas by the coasts get less cold air because the mass of the ocean acts as a temperature moderator. So this is how the climate zones are created. We've got wet and seasonally wet tropics in this band around the equator. Then we have the subtropics that are typically dry out from there to what we call the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn at around 23 degrees. Then we hit the temperate zones, which get hit by the jet stream and are cooler and wetter. As we move higher, we hit the Arctic Circle in the north and mostly ocean in the south. We can see that when we zoom into North America, there are these different air masses that influence our weather, and they basically take turns with each other. Sometimes that Arctic air mass comes down deep into the continent and causes a cold snap. Sometimes the hot and dry air builds up in the interior of the continent and builds a dome that the jet stream just stays up above. Sometimes the jet stream brings cool, moist air as rain and snow over the continent, and sometimes tropical air comes up and gets entrained in the jet stream, bringing warm rain on the coasts and interior.
Yeah, so you get the idea that the air is always moving, and that's why it's so hard to forecast the weather sometimes. And speaking of the jet stream, I want to show you guys what it looks like right now. This is the current jet stream over the country. There's a big dip that's called a trough over the eastern states, and that's slowly going to move east. That's the reason it's raining so much today in some of the eastern cities like New York City and Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. But what's going on over the western United States, those warm colors of yellow and orange, that's a ridge, and that's going to be moving to the east, replacing the trough. But everything is always moving. And by the way, one more thing about snow. When's it cold enough to snow? Well, you can't tell on your backyard thermometer. Sometimes you walk out and you look at your backyard thermometer and it's 40, above freezing, and it's snowing. But sometimes you walk outside and it's 25 and it's raining. So how do you know when it's cold enough to snow? The key, it's the weather balloons. You know, we've talked about those weather balloons. They launch twice a day all over the country. And the key level, it's 5,000 feet off the ground. When it's freezing 5,000 feet off the ground, that's usually when it's cold enough to snow. So that's why the weather balloons are so important. All right, let's dive into another question. Let's go. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Robert, and I would like to know what the conditions are for the formation of different types of clouds.
Ooh, I like that question. I'm a cloud guy. I've loved clouds ever since I was a little guy. When I was little, I would always look up. Sometimes you just need to look up. There's amazing things that you can see up there, but there's clouds around most days. And here are the cloud types. I hope you remember these. We talked about these a few weeks ago. Every kind of cloud has a name. Everybody watching this video has a name. Every cloud has a name. So how those clouds form kind of depends on if the air is going up or down and where the moisture is. And by the way, for clouds to form, air needs to go which way? Up. When air goes down, it literally crushes the clouds away and you don't have a lot of clouds. But when air goes up, you can have clouds. First off, when air's really rising quickly, you get those clouds over on the left over there. Those are called cumulus, little white fluffy clouds that look like marshmallows. And then if they get really big and really tall and it starts to rain, you call it cumulonimbus. Now, the low clouds are called stratus. So for stratus clouds, you need a lot of moisture in the low levels of the atmosphere. The key is where the moisture is. So when the low-level moisture is really deep and rich, you can have this low gray cloud deck called stratus. It's kind of boring. Now, if the moisture is high altitude, you wind up with clouds called cirrus. And I like those clouds. It never, ever, ever, ever rains from them. And they're ice crystals. It's so cold up there. It's way below freezing, and they make for a great sunrise or a sunset. And you can see the mid-level clouds are called altostratus and altocumulus. So in terms of which cloud develops, a lot of it depends on if the air is going up or down and where the moisture is in the atmosphere. All right, let's roll another question.
Hi, James Spann. I'm 5 years old, and I wanted to ask you what tornado sounds sound like.
Ooh, that guy was rocking that Frisbee, wasn't he? I bet she could fling that thing. What do tornadoes sound like? Ooh, well, you know what? I've actually got a recording of an EF5 tornado. I'm not so sure how many of these recordings exist. This might be the only one. I don't know. There's probably others. But this was a recording a long, long time ago. We had a really, really bad tornado in a town called Ewan, Alabama. This was in 19 1974. Wow. That's before your parents were born. And there was, I want to say he was in high school. But back in those days, guess what? We didn't have phones. And when you recorded sounds, you recorded them on something called a cassette recorder, this little machine with tape in there, magnetic tape. It was very odd how it worked. I'm glad we don't have those anymore because oftentimes they would break. But you know what he did? There was a really big tornado coming toward his town, and before they went to their safe place, he decided to roll his tape recorder and let it go. And by golly, it recorded one of the most violent tornadoes recorded in the United States, an EF5 that hit the town of Ewan, Alabama. We did a special report on this several years ago, but listen carefully, really carefully. You'll hear the guy talking about what he was doing, and you'll hear the sound of an EF5 tornado, the biggest kind of tornado known to man.
My dad thought he heard a tornado coming, so I ran to put my tape player up. When I reached my bedroom, I thought, if a tornado comes, I can record it. So I ran and put my tape player in the window with a microphone laying across the window, which was open. I made sure the batteries were working and then ran to the basement.
So that was a real recording of a violent EF5 tornado way back in 1974. I'm really glad he did that because that's something we've got and we can keep for the rest of history. We don't have any video of that tornado, but we've got the way it sounds. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's dive into some more questions. Are you ready? Here we go.
Hi, my name is Heidi, and I am 8 years old. I have a question for you. Where does lightning come from?
Ooh, lightning is what? Frightening. Actually, it's not frightening. Lightning's electricity. And listen, guys, electricity is great. Guess what? If we had no electricity, you couldn't be watching this because I wouldn't have any lights or the computer or any of this, and you couldn't watch it either. So electricity is good. But listen, guys, never stick your finger in an electric socket and never go outside during a storm. But to have lightning, you have to have a thunderstorm, okay? Thunderstorms are kind of awesome. They're an integral part of the water cycle, precipitation. We need them. And in big clouds like that, you got some air going up. That's called an updraft. Some air going down. That's called a, downdraft. You know that. And what's happening in the middle, it's just really crazy in the middle. And by the way, that little dashed line, that's 32 Fahrenheit. That's the freeze line. So everything above the dashed line is snow and ice. Yeah, even in summer, there's ice in a storm because it's so cold off the ground. And then down below that, that's rain. And then that middle part, you've got some of these hydrometeors, raindrops, and ice pellets and snowflakes. They're constantly colliding because some are trying to go up and some are trying to go down. It's like when you bump into somebody in a crowded hallway. And all those collisions, after a while, they generate electrical charges. And after a while, you'll have a discharge of electricity that looks like that. Yeah, so to have lightning, you need a thunderstorm. And you can't have a thunderstorm without lightning because, well, you know what lightning generates? Thunder, okay? And listen, lightning is fascinating to me. By the way, that's a very well-known photograph. In fact, I have a print of that here in my office. This was taken down in southwest Alabama back in the 80s, and that's back when you shot it on film. This was not a phone or anything else. But the one thing about lightning that you only need to know about is just go inside. That's the cool thing about lightning. It's not going to bother you if you're inside your house, if you're in a car, in a truck, in a bus, in a hotel room at the beach. Lightning will never, ever, ever, ever chase you through the front door. All you have to do is be inside. And be thankful that we have a thunderstorm because we need the rain. Everybody watching this, we have to have water. And again, thunderstorms are a vital part of the water cycle, precipitation. And by the way, it doesn't have to be raining to go inside. When you hear thunder, just go in. I love this photograph. This was taken down around Tampa Bay. Notice how the lightning runs way out ahead of that storm. Lightning can be 5, 6, 7, 8 miles out ahead of a storm, even if it's not raining. So when you hear thunder, go inside and all is well. All right? Let's do another question. Let's see what we got here.
Hi, Team Spann. Is there a tornado coming?
No, at least not at the moment. I'm doing this on April 30th in the morning. There is not a single tornado warning in the entire United States. So no, a tornado is not coming today. By the way, speaking of that, I want to show you a video, and let's see if you know what this is. Here's my question to you. Is this a tornado? Yes or no? Is this, what you're about to see, a tornado? Yes or no? Okay, this was captured in Dubai over on the other side of the planet yesterday. And let's see if you're a good meteorologist, a good storm spotter. If you see that, what do you report back to us? Is it a tornado? Is it a funnel cloud? Or is it something else? Is it a tornado? Yes or no? What's your final answer? The right answer is no, it's not. It's something called a dust devil. And that was on a sunny day in Dubai, in UAE yesterday. For dust devils, they're ground-based. They originate down at the ground, and you can have them on a sunny day. Tornadoes, you have to have a what? Thunderstorm. And those originate within that thunderstorm and a mesocyclone. Those dust devils are typically harmless. Now, if you get up in one of these things, they can sandblast you. You can get all sand in your eyes. In fact, I got in one of those things when I was a kid growing up, and I got blasted pretty good because some stuff flies around in there, and that's typically what hurts. But typically, they're kind of harmless. But that is a dust devil and not a tornado. All right, next question, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, James Fan. My name is Addison. My name is Brian, and we have a question for you. We heard that when it is bad weather, you take your jacket off. Why is that?
I've got my jacket off now. You know why my jacket's off now? Here's my secret. I take my jacket off sometimes because it's hot. We have all these TV lights in here, and it gets really, really hot in the studio. Now, this is me when I'm doing the weather on television. And yeah, most every time you watch me, I'm wearing a jacket. And now, I've got some crummy shoes on. You can't see my shoes on television. Those are some really crummy shoes right there. But when we're on TV and the weather gets bad, we stay in that studio for a long time, for hours and hours. And all those lights, it can get so hot. And so years ago, I just started taking my jacket off because I was hot. But now we do realize that people, when they see that jacket off, they think the weather's getting bad. So I have to be really careful when I take my jacket off. But here's the deal. If I've got my jacket off and my sleeves rolled up, it's really bad. Of course, what it means is I'm really hot, but I'm not going to do that unless it's bad. All right, let's go to another question. Here we go.
Hi, my name is Stevie, and I'm 7 years old, and I have a question for you. What's the scariest storm you've ever experienced in your life?
Ooh, and I love those pictures back there on the wall. That was like awesome. That looks like something I would have when I was a kid in my room. Scariest storm I've ever experienced. You know, oddly enough, I was like really, really young. I was in college. I was not doing the weather on television yet. And my hobby back then was ham radio. That doesn't mean ham like you eat. Ham radio, amateur radio. You know, back in the 70s when I was growing up, long ago, guess what we didn't have? Didn't have cell phones. We didn't have tablets. We didn't have Facebook or the Twitter or the Gram. We didn't have any of that. And whenever the phone lines went down, we were it. Ham radio operators were important. And guess what? We still are. Today, a lot of times where a tornado comes through or a big storm, the cell service goes out, and ham radio operators come in and help establish communication with the rest of the world. And I went down to cover, not to cover because I was volunteering. I almost said cover. That's what I do when I'm working. This is way back before I was working. I went to volunteer with my ham radio equipment in the middle of a hurricane. This was way back in 1975. And the hurricane was called Hurricane Eloise. How about that for a hurricane name? And this was pretty bad. And I was with a friend, and we set up our equipment, first off, in a little town in Alabama near the Gulf Coast, but we needed to move east. We wound up in Fort Walton Beach, Florida, when Eloise made landfall in a school. And that was a really big hurricane, and I have never experienced one before. And just the noise alone was horrifying. And I remember there was a lady in the shelter, and she actually had a baby during the hurricane. And for somebody that's never experienced that before, that was pretty crazy stuff. And I will admit, a little fear crept in the middle of that, wondering, when is this going to stop? Is the roof going to stay on this school? This is horrible. So that was my very first hurricane, was Hurricane Eloise, way back in 1975. All right, ladies and gentlemen, more questions.
I'm Declan. We're from Newton, Mississippi. I'm 6. I'm in 5th grade.
I'm 8, and I'm in 3rd grade.
My question is today, why does it sometimes rain when it's sunshine?
And my question is, how did a hurricane get its name called hurricane?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ooh, well, thank you. Very polite gentleman there. I wonder if they pull for Ole Miss or Mississippi State. All right, great questions. Why sometimes does it rain when the sun is out? Well, you know what? Sometimes we call those things sun showers, and it's kind of cool, but they mostly happen in summer. Okay, here's the deal. In summer, on a hot afternoon, the air currents go up really quick, and you get these cumulus clouds, and they grow into storms. And a lot of times they're kind of small. They don't have to be big storms, just small little showers, and they're tiny. So, and look, the sky is big, that shower's tiny, so it covers just a little bitty part of the sky. So in that little spot, you've got that rain, but around it, you've got the sun shining. And the other question was about, where does the name hurricane come from? This actually comes from people that lived in the Caribbean islands hundreds and hundreds of years ago. They had their own language, and they had a word called hurricane. And some of the Spanish explorers came through, and they heard that name, and they took it back to Spain, and all of a sudden, we're still using it today. So how about that? It derives from a word way back in the Caribbean that the Spanish guys took in. All right, guys, we way past our 30-minute limit here. We'll have to cut it off for this week. We try and make these about 30 minutes long. It's kind of hard to sit and watch these things if they're longer than 30 minutes. But, boy, we had some great questions. We have a lot more. I'll do another Ask Spann, and we're going to do this at least for a couple of more times. We'll do this on through the middle of May. And hopefully by August and September, we'll be all back in school again. But before we go, we got to check the Spann cam here. People all the time ask what kind of seeds and stuff in there. This is my wife's doing. My lovely wife takes care of feeding the birds. I just go out there and set up cameras. But I'll tell you this, some of that stuff in there is nasty. It's mealworms and it's dried worms and yeah. But I think that the bluebirds like that, where a lot of the other birds just eat those seeds out there. So let's see here. Let me see if I can find my contact information. That's, you know, my Facebook page because you're watching my Facebook page now. On the other platforms, on Twitter, it's just my last name with 2 N's, Spann, and on Instagram, SpannWX. And if your child has a question, just send me a direct message or post it on the comment section here, and I'll try and grab some more of those for next week. So thank you guys for watching. It's always an honor. I'm in a school every day normally this time of the year. It's so sad. Every day my calendar, I see these notifications about you're to be at this school, and it's just like there's no school right now. So let's do it online like this. So thank you guys for watching. Hope you'll have a great week. And again, we'll plan on seeing you next Thursday, 11 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock Central Time, right here. Thank you all for watching.